Originally, I was going to make this video much more complex, getting multiple video games, but it would become a much bigger project and one I couldn't handle. So in this video, I will explain what I understand about architecture, an analysis about Chinese architecture, notable references in Chinese architecture in the media, and a parallel between the reality of Chinese architecture and the Chun-nan stage of Sonic Unleashed HD. Understanding about architecture. Usually, when people talk about architecture in a common manner, their talk is limited to only 3D forms and the material of structures. While they're not technically wrong, architecture is much richer than what people think. In a sense, architecture reflects much of the culture, philosophy, anthropology, society, and power around us. It might have a better analysis in the future, but for now, I'll get some quotes from professionals and talk about what I understand. If a building becomes architecture, then it's art. Arne Emil Jacobsen, modernist and functionalist Danish architect. Architecture is not only the buildings we see, but more of a reflection of what is around us. Art is a form of expression, but art is an expression of what we are and about what we see. By definition of Wikipedia, art is a diverse range of human activities in creating visual, auditory, or performing artifacts, expressing the author's imaginative, conceptual ideas or technical skills, intended to be appreciated for their beauty or emotional power. In their most general form, these activities include the production of works of art, the criticism of art, the study of the history of art, and the aesthetics dissemination of art. Here's another one. Good design is obvious. Great design is transparent. Joe Sparano, graphic designer for Oxid Design CEO. If you are designing to be noticed, you have the wrong idea. Good designers work well in visual and functional senses and is not seen. In a sense, people don't exactly notice what is good, and we wish for good as the default for the world. Bad opinions revoke critique in a bad manner and make a mistake people never really forget. So, in design, if one's creation seems unnoticeable, he or she created the right thing. For example, there's a video made by Design Doc about good design and bad design. I recommend you to watch it if you want to see more about graphic design. Those two quotes express more of what we can understand of architecture. That is an art design people don't really notice, and at the same time, it's a form of art expression that influences people in a positive manner. Different cultures means different people, thus different architectures. So that's why we will take a look at the Chinese architecture. Usually, before exploring the elements of architecture, it is appropriate to study the history context to understand what about the culture of the people around us reflects on the architecture. However, the elements of history on the land of China, to put it simply, is far too complex. There are a lot of dynasties, each with strong characteristics. For a quick cover-up, read the history of China on Wikipedia. It's going to explain better. For architectural styles, there are three: the popular, the imperial, and the religious. We will focus on the imperial and religious, since they are pretty similar and are the focus of this video. Some remarkable characteristics makes the Chinese architecture what it is. Here's 4 of them. 1. Horizontal emphasis is the evidence of the width of the buildings, relatively low ceilings and constructed according to the Imperial China. Because the material used for Chinese are quite heavy, vertical buildings were not viable to plan. 2. Bilateral symmetry. Symmetry shows the balance of Chinese people, from large monuments like the pagoda to small farms in rural areas. However, landscaping and nature are asymmetrical, since there are no straight lines or symmetry in nature. 3. Enclosed spaces. Even with totally closed constructions, there are open courtyards and skywell. Those are open spaces found in Chinese architecture that receive sunlight, improves ventilation, collects rain, and acts as a vent for the warm air to rise. The last one is cosmology. This part is more about the Feng Shui, which translates to wind water, a pseudoscience that uses energy. Do you know the chi people say it about so much? Yeah, it comes from them. And there's Taoism, the philosophy about the balance and harmony. This is where the yin-yang comes from. But for their architecture influences, they are any source of water in the structure like ponds and pools, talismans and images of good fortune, remember the adventures of Jackie Chan? Back of the structure facing some kind of high-level terrain, like a mountain, and pointing at the north. Now for the more specific part, there is the Imperial. The biggest difference about the Imperial and the Popular is the exterior. For example, only the Imperial and the Religious have the exterior walls and columns red and the roof tile yellow. The Imperial also has dogongs, a mechanism of structural elements, and the Chinese dragon. So, the elements are 1. Yellow tiles roofs to show power. 2. The presence of dogongs. 3. Woods and walls were mostly red. 4. Chinese dragon is present. Now for the Religious. The Religious is similar in some aspects. For example, sometimes it had the yellow roof tiles, a mark only available by the Imperial. But their focus is on two different aspects, the influence of Buddhism and the pagoda. The influence of Buddhism is a more interior analysis, so you'll be left out. But the pagoda are the big ones. They are constructions that resemble towers, and their focus was on religious motives, but they also served for military supervision, for enrichment of the environment, and for ship navigation. This is all there is to it. Now for some notable references before arriving at Sonic. Three. Some notable references of Chinese architecture. Two of the most obvious examples are Avatar Legend of Aang and Mulan. We will talk about Legend of Aang first. First is the Ba Sing Se region. This can easily be seen in the Forbidden City in Beijing. If you didn't know, the parallel of Ba Sing Se is inspired directly by Chinese architecture and Chinese people in general. For example, Ba Sing Se means impenetrable city, a parallel of the Forbidden City. Also, the font is almost identical. Ba Sing Se serves as the Chinese people for the Avatar world, while most specifically Earthbenders represents the Chinese people in general. Their construction is a very rigid one, so no failures in work is permissible in any manner, and they can manipulate rebellion individuals to maintain their order. This is most present in the second book of the Legend of Aang, and all of the colonies and architectural elements of the Earthbending people can be seen a parallel, like the green roofs and the vast open space in the middle. If you haven't watched it, it's a cartoon masterpiece, you should check it. As for Mulan, the movie has many more Chinese elements, and they are much more obvious. I suggest watching it again and noting the connections between this video and the movie. Other honorable mentions goes to, but not limited to, Art of War by Sun Tzu, Sleeping Dogs by United Front Games and Square Enix London Studios, Ling Xiaoyu by Tekken and its developers Bandai Namco, Chun-Li by Street Fighter and its developers Capcom, The Bellsprout Tower by Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver and its developers Nintendo, Creatures Inc. and Game Freak, Jackie Chan by his remarkable representation as a Chinese in the media and the cartoon The Adventures of Jackie Chan. Now for the Sonic analysis. Sonic Unleashed is a game developed by the Sonic team in 2008 that used the boost ability in the 3D for the first time. While not the best Sonic game ever made, it uses the Hedgehog engine that focuses on the graphic capabilities, and it uses the real world as a reference for all locations. For example, Apotos inspired on Greece, Missouri on Western Africa, Spaconia with classical European countries, and Chun-nan with Western China. Our focus. We will use this video as a reference. Links in the description. Thanks again for Mario Tainaka to let me use his video for this analysis. I'll use a personal timestamp to guide us for this analysis. This time will be the internal clock of the gameplay. 0 minutes and 0 seconds.
While not exactly a building, the mountains, red line on the middle with yellow drawings, and the tower around the top of the wall already references the Great Wall of China, one of the new 7 wonders of the world, along with the Taj Mahal and the Colosseum. While the wall by itself does not have remarkable landmarks and its motives for construction is unknown, it has a lot of history on China, on wars between dynasties. The red and yellow mostly references the imperial colors in their architecture, though it is strange that they are on top of the tower. Those little towers also were used for custom analysis. 0 minutes and 10 seconds. Nice detail on those instruments. Those are gongs. They are mostly used in tribal traditions. They are used in orchestras as well. It was created on the Bronze Age and didn't appear around the West until 18th century. 0 minutes and 17 seconds. Already on the top left corner, it is possible to see the pagoda. However, this one is huge compared to the ones Chinese built. Also, those writings are hanging scrolls. Those are used for communication around the area, like who commands in the area. Also, bamboos, very frequent in China. 0 minutes and 23 seconds. Now this one's interesting. You see that hole below Sonic? That's the same kind of hole in Chinese architecture called sky well. They designed that to correlate with the stage. That's a good use of level design there. Also, statues. Most of them are from people, but animals represented in martial arts or in the cosmology section are modeled. 0 minutes and 28 seconds. Dragons are a symbol of imperial power among Chinaland. So only with what we saw, we can conclude this kind of people that live in this area are in high imperial society that are enclosed by the common people amongst them. Also, notice the colors? 0 minutes and 33 seconds. The house in the back is not imperial by any means, because it doesn't have the yellow roof, but it does have the red walls, making this building kind of confusing to put at first, but it can also be a religious space without being a pagoda. 0 minutes and 35 seconds. Now on the left, imperial houses by their characteristics, and on the top right, 2 religious places, one of them being a more realistic pagoda, only because they don't seem that big. 0 minutes and 39 seconds. Seeing those roofs much closer, it's clear that dugongs don't appear in the game, which is a shame, considering already the level of detail this game managed to achieve. 0 minutes and 44 seconds. Next time you watch Mulan, compare Mushu's form with other traditional dragons, including this one. It's so impressive what imagination can do and still retain the original characteristics intact. 0 minutes and 47 seconds. Those archers are traditional. They are called pythons. Important to note is that pythons are noticeable in Chinatowns, specifically in Melbourne. 0 minutes and 55 seconds. While I can't find anything that matches in terms of architecture, the design of the platforms resembles traditional Chinese art, more specifically Chinese plates with more than one color. Also, usually those hangings are used for the Red Lantern Festival and Chinese gates. But those kinds of hangings seem to be original, but it does combine with the platform colors. 1 minute and 5 seconds. Now those should be the red lanterns, but they are kind of strange. They are on top of each other, and there's no architectural elements besides the lanterns to make this scene richer. 1 minute and 9 seconds. The circular gate is called a moon gate, that is a spiritual way to the person and the place. This also appears on Mulan and Legend of Aang. Specifically, the spirit oases on the finals episode of the Book 1 of Aang. 1 minute and 11 seconds. The dragon boats have imperial colors and navigations are a strong characteristic in China. Even though a boat like this is much smaller in the real world, it represents China in more than one form, as a big country, architecture, and its navigation. 1 minute and 14 seconds. The pagodas are with yellow roofs and it's surrounded by water. Remember that water is an important element in Chinese architecture and Chinese navigations. 1 minute and 21 seconds. It's interesting to see the red lanterns on the pagoda, since they are so small to see in this kind of gameplay. But yeah, they're there, but there's no dugongs, so it's still a shame they didn't put those there. 1 minute and 35 seconds. China has a lot of caves and grottos, but I don't think the caves do resemble Chinese characteristics. The only one is the material, that is stone, primary source of the Great Wall. 1 minute and 38 seconds. Maybe the navigations were on a lot of caves? 1 minute and 42 seconds. The pagoda on the distance is too gigantic to have any kind of comparison to the real world, but I personally like the giant building. However, it kind of breaks the horizontal emphasis. Even with other pagodas being tall, that one's real exaggeration. 1 minute and 45 seconds. Particularly, these three buildings, the one with two grey roofs and the one yellow roof, is very bizarre. Imperial construction being so close to the common constructions like that is offbeat. Keep in mind that emperors have their space that only imperial members could access, not ordinary people. 2 minutes and 39 seconds. Although this section is short, there's a lot to take in about this one scene. First, it's dark and the red lanterns are on, hence the Red Lantern Festival. Second, the little rock / firework. Keep in mind that fireworks are a Chinese invention, along with gunpowder to scare evil spirits. Even if this firework didn't explode, it was a nice touch to get it. 3 minutes and 9 seconds. I personally think it's a nice touch that we started on the Great Wall and we ended on the Great Wall. It feels like a trip, a story, and the last part reflects what we saw in the beginning. 3 minutes and 34 seconds. Concluding the level, I found it interesting that the ending finally had some elements of dugong, and we end up with imperial architecture, with religious statues and common houses, all of them pointing to a numbered circle that receives sunlight. Another detail is the pagoda is facing the back to a higher ground, and it also has water behind it. It all feels connected and well studied on this final scene. On all that, it's safe to say that a study was done when making this level. Some elements were only backgrounds, but also in truth with the architecture, like the pagodas. Other elements were gameplay-wise, like the skywell, which I think is interesting when you mix architecture and gameplay. Even if some elements were not realistic, like the giant pagodas, they were true to the fundamentals of architecture. So, it's safe to say that Chun-nan Day Stage from Sonic Unleashed HD is a good source when it comes to Chinese influences. I'm happy this game stayed mostly true from reality. Not only that, but most of the media have a dense studio around them, and their architecture influences are much bigger than most people think.